if you allow somebody to call you a cost center, first and foremost, that's your fault, right? You should come back. You should come back with business reasons on why there's no way in hell you can do your job without me, right? And again, this is an ecosystem. We all evolve and revolve and exist together. Totally get that. But there's one beating heart of an organization. There's only one, and that's talent acquisition, because you cannot sell stuff if you don't have salespeople. You can't create stuff if you don't have product people, right? You can't do any of that without somebody going out and identifying and getting the best talent for you.
For the first 3 episodes of this podcast, I have very specifically talked to non-talent acquisition people. I've talked to branders, I've talked to marketing strategists, I've talked to strategists, I've talked to people who are incredibly smart and have very interesting ideas about how the world works, and tried to bring them to talent acquisition. Today, we're going the other way around. Because you see, talent acquisition is absolutely in a rut. Yes, we love to talk about AI, we love to talk about ChatGPT and all the cool new technology coming around, but to the average recruiter, it's not permeating. The average recruiter still recruits like it's 2010. Frankly. And that means for the 5 or 10% of recruiters who are off doing amazing things, the rest are getting left behind. And that's why I brought in Chad Sowash, the more, shall we say, aerodynamic of the Chad and Cheese podcast pairing. Lately, he's been talking a great deal about the value of talent acquisition. To his way of thinking, if we don't value talent acquisition, why bother changing? We're just a cog in a big machine, so we might as well find the easiest way to do the job. Of course, if you're a recruiter, you never use the word easiest to define what you do and how you do it. But do you also define your work as valuable? In a lot of companies I've seen, that's not the case. Talent acquisition gets treated like a cost center, pushed to the side, squeezed down to as little as possible, and I don't know. If talent acquisition wants to change, if they want to embrace new technology, if they want to be better, it starts by showing the world their value. In my heart, I believe that talent acquisition wants to be the best it can be, to drive the most value to their companies as humanly possible, but they're kind of in a box. And Chad is someone who's trying to say the fastest way out of that box is to define and show your own value in terms that the business actually understands. Chad and I have been friends for a while, so we had a really fun, relaxed kind of conversation. I think you're going to get a lot out of it, especially if you're in talent acquisition. And if you're not in talent acquisition, ask yourself, why doesn't your company value the acquisition of great talent, the people who grow the company? So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Chad Sowash. Hey, Chad, how you doing?
Wonderful.
Where are you right now? Tell people where you are to make them jealous, because you're just that guy.
I am on the southern coast of Portugal right now. It's called the Algarve. That's the technical term. So yeah, it's beautiful, sunny, mid 70s, low 80s. It's kind of nice for November.
Yeah, well, and not Brazil where it's 104,000 degrees
Yes.
in the summer. So yeah, you're walking a really nice tightrope there. That's nice.
Not too bad.
Look, I can't imagine that no one knows who you are. I can't conceive of that. It's like there are people who everybody knows. It's Hung, it's you and Joel. There's a couple other people you're usually like, of course, everybody knows these people. But for those who don't know you because of your podcasts and newsletters and all the work you're doing, I think might be interesting is they don't know your background. They don't know where you came from and what was the kind of the through line of how you got from, let's call you barely functioning adult walking out of high school, college time, what are you going to do with your life too? How did you get to Portugal, right? How did you get, spending the winter in Portugal guy? What's your path?
It's a total fluke. Yeah, it really is an interesting journey, because right out of high school, I knew that I did not want to stay in Mansfield, Ohio any longer. And literally like 6 days after I graduated high school, I was in basic training in the U.S. Army.
Wow.
Yeah. 4 years active, had a little combat time while I was there. And after that, I got out 4 years in. I'm like, okay, that's good. got some college money, all that fun stuff. I went into the reserves because I did like the structure. I did like the military in itself, but I found myself in a copier in fax sales position, which is one of the hardest sales jobs known to humankind, other than maybe like a Kirby vacuum salesperson, right?
Fuller brush salesman. Come on.
Yes, fuller brush salesman. And at that point, I was actually I was recruited over into radio advertising, sales, and promotion, which is probably one of the easiest sales jobs in the world. And you go from something that is totally tangible, that you have to take these copiers in, right? They have to demo the faxes, they've got all these things, right? To something that is totally, you're selling air, you're selling concepts, you're selling promotions, and that was amazing and fun. I was then recruited away from there to a little company that was known as Online Career Center, and it turned into Monster.com.
Here's the turn.
Yeah, which was around. It was actually late 1998. So I've been in this space for a little while.
It's 25 years. That's not nothing.
Not too bad. Not too bad. I was at Monster for a little while. I then served as the number 2 over at Direct Employers, which was the perfect position for about 10 years because I worked directly with Fortune 500 global leaders to process building systems. I mean, everything down in the dirt with them, which is really cool. And we're talking about like a variety of Fortune 500 companies. I worked directly with colleges and universities, actually helped them build one of the very first systems called NACELink, and then worked directly with state and federal government to create the National Labor Exchange, which was infrastructure that connected all the mainly Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 government contractor companies, provided technical infrastructure to deliver jobs down into the state systems, which was something that was incredibly important for compliance. Right after that, I worked with Employee Media, who owned the entire .jobs top level domain. So when you go to get like your .this or .that, when it comes to, they owned everything that ended in .jobs. And we spun up a platform to compete with Indeed that was 40,000 different websites. So like Boston.jobs, BostonSales.jobs, Sales.jobs, and all of those, literally the canonical domains were the search queries. Yeah. So whatever you went to, and all you had to do was go to your browser and type in, sales, Boston.jobs or BostonSales.jobs or OmahaSales.jobs or Omaha Brush Sales, whatever the hell it was, right? And then it just automatically, it happened, and it had one platform that fed all of those. So that was incredibly awesome. It failed because Google liked the simplicity of Indeed and us just bombarding them with 40,000 different sites that had only corporate content, not job board content, but corporate content, was just too much for them to deal with. I found myself at Randstad, well, actually at Recruit Military for a little while, at Randstad, their RPO division, where I actually led and built their first and only veteran hiring program for all of their clients. Literally built Ford Motor Company's veteran hiring program for them, and ejected out of there, revived my consulting practice. And the Chad and G's podcast literally started as a branding exercise for Joel and I, right? Yeah. I had my own company. He had his own company. We wanted to get back out there, and it's turned into the news, opinion, and content machine that it is today.
What year was that? When did it start?
2017. I tried. It took me about a year to get his ass off the couch. Yeah.
But 6 years for a podcast that is old school podcasting. That is a long time.
Yeah. We're approaching 2,000 episodes. I think we're close to 1,800 now.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But so hold on. So you came in through sales and you deal with recruiting, and everybody equates that recruiting is sales is recruiting sort of thing. What's your take on that? Like how full of crap is that, or how real is that?
Oh, I mean, it's totally real. I mean, there are definitely nuances, right? But when you're talking about recruiting, you're literally trying to sell the position to the top candidates, and then on the other side, you're trying to sell the top candidates to the hiring managers,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, it's like a dual capacity sales approach. Not to mention from a marketing standpoint, from a technology standpoint. I mean, recruiters, I mean, they are, I would say, the ultimate salespeople. The ones that do it incredibly well. So anybody who says that recruiting is not sales, they've never been in sales.
The problem I have with that though is that if you say recruiting is sales, there is so much research and so much knowledge about how to do good sales, and recruiters kind of go, but I'm not a salesperson. Like it's like there's a gold mine. And the same for email marketing. If you think about the amount of emailing a recruiter
Mm-hmm.
does in a given day, and it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
why don't you listen to email marketing podcasts or email marketing books? Like there's a
Oh
treasure
yeah.
trove of good thinking out there that they're just kind of ignoring.
The best ones do, though. I mean, and that's the thing
Fair.
is that the ones that progress, the ones who stay, the ones that literally, I mean, there are ones during the pandemic were doing 3 full-time jobs because they're so damn good. Nobody could keep up with them in one of those jobs, but they were
Yeah.
doing 3 of them and just making hay, right? If you do those things like you're talking about, if you actually teach yourself or learn or go through some of the Udemy's or what have you, I mean, you will kick ass and take names, and not many humans can scale
Yep.
incredibly well, especially in recruiting. But if you can just broaden your bandwidth up just a tad, man,
Yeah.
you can just kill the game.
Totally. So that's a nice segue because I want to get into really and as I mentioned, the podcast here is kind of rethink. The stuff that we've been doing over and over again is kind of broken. And I
Yeah.
know people say, it's recruiting's not broken. I'm like, it is and it isn't. And I don't want to get in the quibbling here, but I think we've definitely been having these same conversations for decades,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh
I'm
yeah.
so sick of having the same conversations, the same complaints. Like, if we're going to make things better, we have to change. So
Yeah.
let's start with kind of like baseline thinking. And if like an alien were kind of beam himself down or herself or what themself or what self or whatever, it's an alien, what do I know, it shows up at your door and says, please explain to me talent acquisition. What is it? Define it. What's the value of it? What would you say?
Okay, so long version, I would go with, talent acquisition identifies, finds, recruits, and hires the talent necessary for any organization to actually run. No company can ideate a product, develop that product, deliver the product, sell it, service it, retain customers, or even gain wallet share without talent acquisition. So the short answer is every company dies without talent acquisition.
Love it. So, but take it beyond that. I mean, that's very one. First off, I love that you're boiling it down to business terms. Like,
Yeah.
without it, there's no growth. Without it, there is no business. Without it, the
Yeah.
company dies. But
Mm-hmm.
let's expand that out a bit. To kind of say, what is talent? Do you have like a scope of talent acquisition? Like, where does talent acquisition start and end? How do is it in a box? Talk me through your thinking there.
So I think we need to rethink how we're actually creating narratives and how we're thinking about what we do on a daily basis. We need to be more strategic. We also need to think a more business minded, right? We have to have business answers instead of coming up with our own metrics, right?
Yeah.
Like time to hire, nobody gives a shit, right? Cost per hire, nobody gives a shit, right? Those are your metrics, your analytics that they're important to you, but the C-suite doesn't give a shit. The CRO doesn't give a shit. CMO, they don't care, right? We have to be able to take those metrics further down the line to be able to show how 30 days versus 60 days getting a vital position filled, what that actually costs the organization. If it's 60 days, what does it cost? What that open position costs the organization something. What is it? The problem is we don't go business line by business line in understanding how we impact and how the talent actually impacts the bottom line, whether it's product, again, whether it's sales, service. I mean, if it's a vital role, there will be a correlation to the bottom line, period.
Mm-hmm. And that I would want to take it another step. It's not just empty or not. It's about, look, there's certain roles where just empty or not is enough, but there's
Yeah.
certain roles that are company changing. If you have someone of quality, you grow the companies. You have opportunities, you have options, you have channel selection choices, you've got business selection choices that you simply didn't have if you just filled the role. And we don't even talk about that at all.
Well, yeah, and I mean, we also have to understand we're in a space where speed kills, right? It either kills us or it kills our competitors. We either get to that talent in a very quick manner without throwing them into a black hole or what have you. And this might not have been the first time we touched that candidate, right? It could have had a bad touch years ago where they came through the process and they were totally ghosted, right? So we have to think more long term about how we are impacting all of these individuals and getting to the best talent the fastest, and also being incredibly fluid. Something that really bothers me is that, we try to come in with this box method. Here's the box and you're done, right? You're never done. The landscape, the terrain, everything is constantly changing. And if we don't continuously assess what's going on, not just in our own house, but going out and talking to the CROs and the CMOs and the CFOs and so on and so forth, and understanding what's happening in their landscape, then we are going to continue to fight fires like we do today. And that's a problem.
Quick question. If you could increase the offer acceptance rate by 20%, what would that be worth? Or maybe get 10% more prospects responding to your recruiters, what would that be worth? Or lowering your ad spend and your agency spend by 15, 20%. What would that be worth? I'm going to bet it's worth a lot more than $1,500 a month. And that's how much it costs to build an employer brand, especially when you treat it as a subscription or employer brand as a service. If you want to learn more about how you can make these kinds of impacts almost immediately, check out employerbrandlabs.com. That's employerbrandlabs.com. All right, let's get back to the podcast. So that's a really interesting point that you bring up, that there is this box and recruiters are expected to exist in it. They are handed a base level set of tools, a tech stack, a process. They exist within a larger hiring system that HRBPs, comp and ben, executives, all these other pieces have already defined for them. And they've got this little space and they're expected to do as they're told. They're expected to send these mail. We're a company that sources out, or we're a company that waits for the end to apply. There's always this kind of dogma or philosophy implied. And it feels like we're hiring recruiters who, let's be fair, are not exactly cheap in any way, shape, or form, thank goodness. Yeah. But we're handcuffing them the second they get in the door. And we're saying, do not think, do not try, just answer these questions. Just do as you're told. Just color inside the lines. Where is that? Do you have any sense of where does that thinking come from?
Well, it's top down. It's all top down, right? And it's a very rigid thought process. And again, it's one of the reasons why many talent acquisition leaders are fighting fires today, because they are trying to work within a box, and the world doesn't fit within a box, kids. It's constantly changing. It's not a box. It's a sphere. It's a this, it's a that. Who the hell knows, right? But it's something entirely different than what you started off with. And if leaders have that connective tissue to the different lines of business, then they'll understand how things are ebbing and flowing. Not to mention, if they also keep those lines of business responsible and accountable for the process, and also for budget. Because let's say, for instance, you're flooding me with all of these jobs. I don't have resources to actually fill all these positions. Which ones are vital? Well, wait a minute. What do you mean which ones are vital? Which ones are vital? Because those are the ones that we're starting with, number one. Number two, I can only do the top 5 unless you give me X amount of budget. Then I can expand my resources. I can also take a look at new technologies to be able to fit what your business solution is needing, right? That's the thing. We need to be more flexible in dealing directly with the lines of business. And we're not. We just sit and wait for them to send us something. It's like, oh, what rec is coming in today? What rec is coming in today? And we need to be more proactive, and we need to have that connective tissue to the business.
Is that sense of being, one, connected to the business, two, challenging the business on what expectations are? Is that what you mean by strategic? Because I feel like that's a word that we throw around all day long. And frankly, most people don't define it very well. So let's dive into that.
I will give you a great example. So Trent Cotton, who's a TA leader in our space, he will literally tell hiring managers, no, that's not a vital position. And a couple of different reasons why. You can't demonstrate to me why it's vital to the organization, number one. Number two, you're not taking enough time. I mean, you have too many roles in, right? And we can only do top five, and you know that. So since you can't, number one, demonstrate that this is vital to the company, to the organization, and I am a steward of the company, right? And the money that is spent and not spent. I mean, that's one of the things that we have to do. We have to hold all of these lines of business, because if we know the business, and again, this goes back to learning the business, if we know the business and we understand, then we can have these adult conversations. Today, we just sit and wait to get flogged. Yeah. Right? We're in the town square getting flogged because we're not doing our job and understanding the business and having that connective tissue with our peers. Mm-hmm. They're not above us. They're our peers, and the organization doesn't exist without us.
And you're getting squeezed from two different sides. On one side, you've got leadership money saying less budget, less budget, less budget. So there's less peanut butter to spread. And then you've got more and more hiring managers saying spread that peanut butter thinner and thinner and thinner. And obviously the net result is nothing gets done well.
Yeah. Well, Jeff Lackey, when he was the VP of talent at CVS, not a small organization,
top five.
90% of his budget came from other lines of business, because he went to them and said, look, here's my little bitty budget. Here's what you're asking me to do. I can't do it. It's not, I can't spread the peanut butter thin enough. And if I do, my people are going to leave because I'm spreading my resources too thin. And then guess what? You're not going to get what you need to get done. So therefore I need X amount of budget to be able to make this happen. And there is this kind of like, they're your peer and customer at the same time conversation that's happening, which means if you start taking money from them, you better have your shit right and you better perform.
Yeah. But honestly, first off, as a sort of tangent, your best customers are your peers. You should treat them as your peers. You should engage with them as peers. You are partners in this solving this problem. Yep. And at the same time, I want to unpack what you just said a little bit to make it more clear. And it's this idea that TA leaders are often said, they're Oliver, please, sir, can I have some more money because I want the money more? And so we could do a whole Dickens play. It's okay. Whatever. So they're asking for more, but they're just asking for more. They're not giving a good reason, compelling reason why. And I think we're missing that piece of the reason you should be asking for more is because it leads to better business outcomes, not team outcomes, not TA outcomes, not recruiting outcomes, not HR outcomes, but to better business outcomes. And the more we tie to that, the more TA is seen as not just this cost center, and there's a buzzword I knew we'd get to eventually, right? We couldn't have missed that one. But the more they say that, the more they're treated as a cost center. And the more you're a cost center, the more you're a thing you squeeze to it's as small as humanly possible.
If you allow somebody to call you a cost center, first and foremost, that's your fault, right? You should come back. You should come back with business reasons on why there's no way in hell you can do your job without me, right? And again, this is an ecosystem. We all evolve and revolve and exist together. Totally get that. But there's one beating heart of an organization. There's only one, and that's talent acquisition, because you cannot sell stuff if you don't have salespeople. You can't create stuff if you don't have product people, right? You can't do any of that without somebody going out and identifying and getting the best talent for you. So we have to stiffen our spine. We have to stop the Oliver bullshit, and we have to actually take those numbers down the line, and we have to learn the business. And we're talking to a CRO. We're like, hey, look, we can actually get sales people in those positions faster, which is going to help you get to goal faster, not to mention achieve prospectively that goal much faster. If we do X, Y, and Z, if we have this kind of budget. I can't do it with this because it's just too thin.
So if you take a step back and you look at companies at budgets, honestly, I can't get good solid numbers, but my sense is on average, a company's spending anywhere from 4 to 7% of its operating budget on talent acquisition. The ATS, the recruiting salaries, the tech stack, the space, all of that stuff. You're talking 4 to 7%, which is not an insignificant sum of what a company spends, right? It is it's a real chunk of change. This is not a rounding error, the money you find under the couch cushions. So how come a business says, yes, we're going to give 7% of our operating income to this organization, but we're not going to let them make decisions? How does that happen?
because we're not treating talent acquisition as a business. I mean, as TA professionals, every talent acquisition leader should know which roles, again, are vital to the organization and what those roles actually cost the bottom line on a daily basis. That's powerful. Yet you ask any TA leader today, and they don't have a damn clue.
Yeah.
That's the problem. If you can say, look, here's a list of my vital roles, that is amazing, right? If you don't have that, go to the lines of business and again, start those conversations. But the thing is, you challenge them. Why are these vital? Why are these vital? And if they are vital, okay, now we need to start looking at what it's going to cost for us to ensure that we get those vital roles filled quicker with better talent, right? That we have better retention and less attrition, because again, that all goes down to the bottom line, whether it's filling the role, but also keeping somebody happy in that role.
Yeah. Yeah. So how much of that cost center perspective, being assigned and labeled a cost center, comes from having to live inside another cost center, i.e. HR, right? Would it be different if TA was kind of floating loose and relative to the business or connect to the business or some other team? And and as an employer brander, I hate the game of where should the employer brand live? It's a parlor trick. It's a game. It's a thing we play when we're bored. But is there any thought of, because HR is a cost center and because HR is a structure that is designed to eliminate risk wherever possible, putting a business unit inside a risk removal unit is a recipe for disaster?
Yeah, I mean, we could have a whole podcast on how HR is not a cost center because of many different aspects of the reasons why, right?
Yeah.
But let's talk to the TA professional right out of the gate. It doesn't matter what your big brother says you are. Okay. None of that matters. It doesn't matter what your big brother says you are. You have to have a stiff enough spine to go to the CHRO, demonstrate what is happening because you're having conversations with the lines of business, right? And you have to teach them. This is an education process, right? This is a relationship that you have to build to ensure that not only you get what you want, but if you get what you want, then they should be getting what they want. Right. And I know this sounds like a utopia, but it is a hell of a lot more utopian than what we're doing today.
And I think we can't let go of the idea that it sounds like we're telling TA leaders, go do this thing, as if they're the only part in this player, the only player in this dance, right? I've seen it happen where when TA leaders step up and say, look, this is what we need, and they get it from the business treats them better. The business respects them. The business opens the door a bit more. The business includes them in conversations. And if you want to achieve better outcomes, not just for the company, but for yourself, to be seen as a true leader, that is the doorway through, is to make those hiring managers understand that you are a business person first and foremost.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's really interesting because you go into any new company and it's an entirely different landscape. You've got to figure out what is more important to them. I remember being at Randstad and you knew you were in a leadership call because they said EBITDA like 27 times within the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you understood what mattered. So then you could focus on how you could deliver to what their needs were. Right. That's going to be different from company to company. So that's the biggest key. And again, we try to kind of like pull ourselves back, go into the corner, get in the fetal position, put our thumb in our mouth, as opposed to getting up, stiffening our spine, and finding out what the hell we can do to help the business. I mean, that's the biggest key. If they see that, and if they see that happening, then of course you're going to be seen as an equal, because without you, they don't exist.
Yeah, totally. So let's kind of take a turn here to move to a different line of thought, because while I love this, and I'm glad this is a conversation that should be had more and more often about strategy and position, and frankly, treating TA like a true business function in every respect, in every aspect of the word. But you've spent the last 6 years on the podcast really diving deep on technology, and it's an interesting process because recruiting has always wrestled with technology, right? Yeah. I know recruiters who couldn't spell Google. I know recruiters who code, right? I know it's a wide spectrum.
Oh yeah.
But we all know technology is on so many levels leading the change of what recruiting is all about. you've set yourself up, I think, and maybe this is intentionally, maybe this is not, but this is certainly my perspective, and tell me where I'm wrong, is that you've seen it as a little skeptically. You said just because it's new doesn't mean it's good. Just because it's cool doesn't mean it's good. What is it? And I think that perspective of how do you connect it to business outcomes is so vital. It's not like, ooh, it's AI because I sprinkled the AI like sugar on my cornflakes. It's not magically better, but what is the business outcome of achieving? So in the 6 years where you've been skeptical, and let's be fair, the last 6 years has been a sea change, an absolute sea change of technology.
Oh yeah.
What have you learned both about technology and about business organizations and recruiting in general?
Yeah, the biggest thing that talent acquisition professionals need to think about is the end outcome, right? Not how you get there. Is it AI? Is it RPA? Is it a chatbot? Is it no, because that's going to be different from, again, company to company, landscape to landscape, experience to experience. So you have to really understand what that intended outcome is. And we're not talking about like at the end, I want a good hire, right? We're talking about the whole process, and there are point solutions out there all over the place. So, I've learned that there will always be great solutions that are helping us advance our business position, which is what we should always be doing. But then there are also a ton of vendors that are out there that are vaporware. They're over-promising, they're under-delivering. There's also tech that's entering the space from outside talent acquisition, and they're providing solutions for problems that, quite frankly, don't exist, and or they're not priority enough where HRT is ever going to give a shit about them, right? So there's a lot of noise. And sometimes it can be just deafening. The biggest difference between the 25 years that I've been in this space is scale and the pure amount of technology entrance into this space, and their ability to achieve some type of minimum viable product is getting more fast and more furious day by day.
The point or the purpose of employer brand is to help people choose your company as a place to work over other companies. Now, put that way, suddenly employer brand doesn't seem so complicated. It doesn't seem so crazy. And it seems like something your company could take advantage of. And it is. Take a look at employerbrand.ing, employerbrand.ing, or employer branding, and you can find hundreds of resources, either free or dirt cheap, to help you understand what employer brand really is, how it really works, how to measure it, how to value it, how to talk about it, how to sell it to your boss. So check out employerbrand.ing for all sorts of employer brand resources to help you take advantage of your company's employer brand. I make the joke sometimes that if you've ever been married, you understand that if you go to the grocery store and you buy a pack of paper plates for $100, 100 paper plates, it's like $4. If you label them as wedding paper plates, it's $2 a pop.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think on some level, talent acquisition suffers the same challenge, because I think there's an assumption, and maybe this is my cynical black beating heart. And we all know you are not a stranger to a cynical black beating heart, sir. No. I think there's this cynical sense that tech vendors assume TA leaders couldn't spell HTML with a gun to their head. They have no clue how this technology works. And I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's an expectation. And because of that, there's been a lot of misrepresentation. There's been a lot of over-promising. It just magically it does this thing. And I think that's where in a lot of ways, talent acquisition has a real challenge of how does it mature enough to actually evaluate technology for their own needs, and not because this is what everybody likes or this is what everybody says is cool.
Well, again, going back to this whole line of thinking, if we're being seen as a strategic ally, right, in business, then we can start to get assets that will help us, either external assets or internal assets that'll help us better understand the noise that's happening out there. Because again, we can't just buy tech and then put it down and then walk away for 3 years. Yeah. Right. We've got to be constantly thinking of the terrain shifts that are happening left and right. So, I mean, we have to have partners that are going to help us with that.
And it's extra challenging because of the position TA is within the organization, in a budget annual budget structure. You start to think about what you want in the summer. You
Yeah.
start to write it down in September and submit it. You hear how much of that is going to get approved in January. And let's be fair, in many organizations, it's not till March that you actually see the money. And 3 months later, you're starting for the next year. And when your ability to make choices on a financial level, on a technological level, is so glacially slow, how does that change what TA can take advantage of? Like, if a CP or CFO says we need this thing, they're the ones with the checkbook. They can cut that check tomorrow, right? It's easy. When the head of TA says we want this something, it's a year to 2 years before anything can change. In that world, how do we change? How do we keep up with the times? I know surfing or skating where the puck is, but how do you know when all this stuff is changing all the time?
Yeah. So first and foremost, we already know what the game is. So, don't be surprised when you have to play the game and you lose, right? You've got to adjust how you play the game. Okay. So, the cycle that you run in, right? You have to make sure that you have a couple of different things. You have partners that are technical vendors / partners that are there that are more fluid, that you can be a part of creating and being possibly a part of the roadmap, or somebody on your staff consulting on part of the roadmap. But whenever we say that, well, we've run out of budget, well, that's just because you're not creative and you're not dealing with the other lines of business. And here's a great example. Amy Butchko, who was the VP of talent, technology? Yeah, talent technology for SAIC, not a small company
here in Chicago.
She amazingly, she went to the CRO because the CRO is like, hey, why can't I get my positions filled quick enough? And she's like, let me show you why. So she showed her the system, right? And she said, this is what we need. We need to be able to move away from this. We need something that's faster, something that'll do this, something that does what you need to have done, right? You need to have done, but I don't have the budget for this. The CRO, she said, how much do you need? She showed her the number. She's like, let's do it. I will fund that. That is the kind of mindset that we have to be in, because as we're looking at our budget, again, Jeff Lackey, 90% of his budget was from out there, right? Amy went directly to the CRO, said, hey, look, this is a project. You need it because this is for you. This is what it's going to cost. Me and my team will take care of this for you.
I want to unpack that just one more step, because I think if I'm a TA leader, I'm hearing this and it sounds wonderful. It sounds amazing. And who's this guy, Chad? And what is he doing in Portugal? And why is he not spreading this gospel farther and wider? And I know, let's be fair, you're doing
trying.
Yeah, I know. You're right. That's why we're here. The stumbling block is a lack of trust that TA leaders are often seeing as serving the TA team before they're seen as serving. So is there one kind of just trick, technique, tool that you can tell a TA leader to say, look, when you walk in that room, you're talking to a hiring manager who's got a deep, deep need, and you also happen to know they've got a pocket full of cash that you'd love to pull a little out of, right?
Yeah.
What is the way, or how do you start that conversation? What do you do? I'm just going to open it wide because I don't know where you're going to go with this, because this is a random question. How do you start to build that trust?
It's step by step. It's like any relationship. You can't just walk in and boom, have somebody's trust right out of the gate, right? And so you have to start building that connective tissue and understanding the business, because once you demonstrate that you care what they want and need, and you start talking about how you work together to actually make that happen, and you're transparent, say, hey, look, this is what my budget is, this is what I can feasibly afford to do for you, then you've let the walls down. You've helped them understand what the business situation is. Then you together start talking about business solutions. You do that from one line of business to the next line of business, and you have an open and honest, transparent conversation with them. Now, if you get a chance to actually get to the big kids table to have this conversation, this is where all the business information lines up. You're not talking about a bunch of metrics that are bullshit talent acquisition metrics. You're talking about things that shareholders give a shit about. As soon as you start doing that, the C-suite goes, whoa.
Yeah.
whoa, okay, wait a minute. Let's have that discussion, right? So this is not an overnight, win. You have to do the work. You and your team, right? Have to do the work. Jeff, again, go back to Jeff Lackey at CVS. His number two was responsible for just one department bringing $10 million of budget in from just one department. Why? Because they knew the business need, and and together, them and that line of business actually understood that with that little bitty budget that HR and TA has, it just wasn't going to get done. So they made it work.
Wow. Okay, so clean sheet of paper here, real quick.
Okay.
I'm asking your opinion on your position is so interesting because you've been around TA leaders for your entire career, one shape, form, or another.
Yeah.
If you were to build your own TA position the TA function from a clean sheet of paper, what's the most important, or just sort as best you can? I know this is a tough question, but what's most important? Technology, people, process, strategy, mindset, or relationships? What's most and least important? So we got technology, people, process, strategy, mindset, and relationships.
So, all of them are important, but it depends on the company and the terrain that you find yourself in.
Okay.
And, should you rank strategy above relationships, let's say? Well, if you find yourself as a leader in a new company, you need allies, which means you need relationships, and that takes priority, right? Because you can create an amazing strategy, but without allies, that shit just falls on deaf ears, right? Yeah. So the landscape of every situation is different. I have seen many incredibly successful TA leaders. They have their roadmap from the company that they just came from, and they bring that roadmap into the organization. And 60 days later, we're having a discussion. They're like, it's just not working. Yeah. It's not working. And you're like, well, yeah, because you're trying to build the exact same house on entirely different land. It doesn't work that way, right? So we have to be incredibly smart people, and they pivot and they work differently. That's what we have to do. We have to be more fluid in thinking, what is my situation? How do I prioritize? Then, once again, you're going to have to reprioritize as you get more time in the seat, or you've been in the seat for years, or what have you, or leadership changes. There's all these different changes. You're going to have to reprioritize what's the focus, right? And what stacks up next, because you could go into an organization that has a halfway decent tech stack to some extent, right? And that's okay. And you can allow that to work, right? As you start to build relationships and et cetera, et cetera. So, without answering the question, that's the answer.
I know, actually, I think you did answer it. You just don't realize it. I think the mindset of having a fluid approach to looking at your problems, looking at your challenges as they really are, not as you remember them from the last job. Like it's the Super Bowl coach who says, okay, I'm just going to take the same plan and take it to this new team. Turns out I don't have nearly as good quarterback. So I don't know, suddenly it all falls apart. Yes, that's right. A sports metaphor here on a recruiting employer brand podcast.
Never heard of that.
It doesn't happen. So, gosh, mentally, I'm just unpacking it. I think it could go in 14 different directions. I don't want to go too. I don't want to go.
Give yourself some time. That's what we do here in Europe. We give each other time. We give each other time.
A little glass of Chianti. There we go.
Yeah, it's about that time.
Yeah. So do you think most TA leaders come at it from this is how I was taught it, or this is what worked the last company and just going to go with it? Is that a big part of the challenge? And I think that goes, if that's true, doesn't that go back to this in the box thinking that there is a way of doing things that as recruiters and leaders, we should be saying, no, there is no right answer. It's whatever we can make work.
Well, that's a very human thing. That's a very American thing. This is just go down this road and you'll get to exactly where you need to go. I think I was lucky enough in spending 20 years in total in the military, and everybody thinks that the military is incredibly regimented, where when you're being taught something, there is a regiment, there's a standard operating procedure, although we train for all the different variables, right? Or we at least try to. And that is one thing that's just from my mindset and how I've been able to structure it, much different than most people who've only been, in the civilian world, where I'm automatically thinking of contingency plans, pivots, different terrain, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think as we're taught in school, right? This is 2 + 2 = this, and this is how you get there, and blah, blah, blah. It's just, it's a standardized structured format because it's easier to teach a large segment of people, but that is not how the world works.
Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways we expect our recruiters, because recruiters didn't go to school for this. They come at it from with their own lived experience, and they've kind of fumbled together a set of skills that work for them.
Right.
But to say, well, I don't know what your skills are, and I can't understand all these different things that you sort of kind of know. So everybody just jump in this box and kind of exist in this way, because as a leader, you've got to figure out how to orchestrate all these different people to create a broader outcome. And when you don't understand, well, it's not just this is a sorcerer and this is a recruiter. It's that this is a sorcerer who really loves making phone calls. They love engaging. They want to have a conversation with that person to find the next 5 people to talk to. This is a recruiter who wants to email everybody. And if they could never get on a phone call for the rest of their life, they would totally do that. Or they're a content marketer at heart, where they just want to tell stories and be a loudmouth out there to attract people to them. And you, as a leader, how do you orchestrate? How do you bring them together? I imagine that's a huge challenge for a lot of TA leaders.
Well, you have to understand it. Again, we're gonna go to a sports analogy. If your quarterback is a running quarterback, stop trying to keep them in the pocket.
Yeah.
Okay. Let them flow. Let them free. Right. So if you have that recruiter that is incredible on the tech side, then that's an asset for you to be able to allow them, kind of unleash them to some extent on technology. You've got somebody who's more on the marketing side. I mean, those are great things to have. Don't try to rein them in. Try to give them some play, and then how they can actually help you. Right. I mean, just don't tell them just to stay in the pocket, because that doesn't always work.
I love it. Okay. So let's kind of wrap it up. I got 2 questions to wrap it up with, though. They're a little open-ended here. So if I could give you a magic wand and you could change TA leaders' minds about one thing, what would that one thing be about?
That you're not a cost center. I mean, that you are literally the beating heart of every organization. And in saying that you have to double, triple, quadruple down on learning the business. We have so many smart people in talent acquisition. Hell, some with MBAs, for God's sakes. And it's almost like they forget it. It's like they forget the business logic that they've been taught their entire lives. And then they just go into this firefighting mode in recruiting and talent acquisition. We've got to get back to the business thinking and strategy.
So I want to connect that to something, because I spent a little time in biotech, and you're talking to recruiters who have to engage with people who have computational biology degrees and experience. And I don't actually know what that means. And I would gather you would probably be hard pressed to kind of explain that too.
Yeah.
These are potential world changers. And I wonder and I know that they feel a little bit hamstrung because they can't speak the same language, right? They can spell DNA, but let's be fair. Once you get into mitochondria, it's all, 3rd grade plays, right? Okay. So the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the thing. I don't know. There's an opportunity there to say, well, first off, most recruiters end up leaning towards the ATS says I have to do it this way. And so therefore I have to do it this way. And you're really kind of, without saying it, but kind of saying it, reject what the ATS is saying and focus more on what is your business needs. And that means learning the business, which can be learning their functional area, but it also can be learning how they look for jobs, learning what they engage with, learning how to get them to build content, to share what they know so that you can share and pass it on. There's so many ways to kind of expand that out. I wonder if the challenge we're going to have is while the phrase a leader must understand their business is a great line, and it's 1,000% true, it can get really hackneyed in a heartbeat. to unpack it, to say, what does it mean to learn the business? What does it mean to say, how do we get more salespeople? If it's CVS trying to fill the business full of people who run cash registers and scan product, yeah, you need $10 million because without that, you're not making any money. Okay, so that's one way of learning the business. But how do you also learn the business? This is how do you manage huge amounts of money for an insurance company because CVS is also Aetna? Like that, those are the challenges we face.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of the reasons why, especially when you're an organization that big, Jeff had, second, third, he had people that actually knew those things, right? Yeah. And that was, where he received, I'm sure, some of that money. He was putting it in his subject matter experts from those lines of business. I mean, again, if you're going to run the business of TA, which is exactly what it is, how would you set it up as a business, right? If you take a look at TA orgs today, they are not set up as a business. They are not set up as a business. We need to set talent acquisition up as its own business.
Well, thank you for writing my teaser line right there. That was what that was. That's all it was. So everybody else, tattoo that on the inside of your eyelids. Last question. Is there a challenge you'd like to give the audience? Something you'd like them to do today, tomorrow, next week? Just what is a challenge you could give them?
Yeah, I mean, stop fighting fires and start looking for solutions to curb global warming. Okay. The fires aren't going to stop if we don't stop this up top, right? It's a strategic issue. And if we don't understand what is causing global warming and we can't curb it or stop it, then we're going to continue fighting fires and we're just fucked. I mean, we're screwed. We can't get past that. Right. So I challenge you to think on a more strategic level and again, start thinking like a business, because if you don't do it, you're going to continue doing the same thing over and over and over. And unfortunately, you're going to have good days, but you're going to have a lot of bad days.
Chad Sowash, ladies and gentlemen. Chad, where can people, I mean, aside from the obvious Chad and Cheese podcast, which let's be fair, again, if you don't know the podcast or at least not aware of it, you don't have to be the biggest fan in the world, but everybody's got to know it. Where can people find you? What should they be listening to right now?
Yeah, you can just go to chadcheese.com and or anywhere you listen to podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, doesn't matter. You can go there. Or I am the only Chad Sowash on LinkedIn, I think, in the world. So nice. You can just go ahead and, it makes it easy. You just go ahead and just look up Chad Sowash, hook up with me, connect with me on LinkedIn.
He's a really nice guy, I promise. He even listens and talks to me occasionally. It's kind of crazy. Shh, I won't tell anybody. Don't worry. I'll be nice about it. Good. Chad, thank you so much for this. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate it more than you know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man.
All right. Talk to you later. Thanks, everybody.